Good day, and welcome to one of our Ransom's weekly wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll go over some stories of the week and do a little AI segment at the end to wrap things up. Okay, our three stories of the week is as follows: the Chinese credit downgrade, South Africa's GDP number, and the oil price. So let's start off with the Chinese downgrade. So we are seeing a credit rating downgrade for China. This, is obviously a little disappointing. But it kind of makes sense. Their economy has started to grow slower than previously. It has huge demographic structural issues regarding, the working age population is shrinking quite dramatically in China over the last few years, and it's going to be continuing for the next couple of decades at the very least. And in addition to that, we are seeing, issues with regards to its ability to firstly develop technology. It's been really hampered by, US sanctions and other Western sanctions, as well as the fact that, there is a move to outshore, basically to stop producing as much in China as there was in the past, to, have more what they call onshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, basically produce stuff in places that are either in your own country, near to your country, or in places that are more friendly to you than China is. Longer term, this is a trend that we expected to occur. I've discussed this with you guys in the past around the bifurcation, the splitting of the global economy. On one side, you have the US and its allies, on the other side, you have China and its allies, Russia, Iran, etc. And you have the countries in the middle, places like India, places like in the Middle East, to a certain extent, Africa, some parts of South America. So you have like Europe, the US, Japan, Australia in one part, and China and its group on the other part, and a bit of a middle ground with India and Africa and South America, kind of flirting between the two sides. Now, longer term, I do have a great deal of worry about the Chinese economy. I certainly don't think it's as robust, as stable as the US economy. And to give you an idea as to like the kind of the reasons I would go for that is that, the Chinese demographic situation is something that has not been experienced anywhere in the world previously. There's other places in the world that have gotten old. That means they have less children and so on, but they usually do it after they get rich. Japan is rich, it's getting old. Italy is getting old, but is rich. South Korea is getting older, but is rich. China is still not rich. I mean, it's a rich country as a whole, but that's because of a huge population. But they're not rich per person. Their per capita GDP is a fraction of what the US is or Japan's is even. And it's getting old. It's getting old faster than most places in the world because of things like the one-child policy in the past. There's other factors local specific to China. But they are getting old without having this huge amount of money available. And also, the one way in which people have been trying to save for retirement in China has been investing in property. So because of the kind of issues with the Chinese stock market, where you can't really get money out of the country as easily, etc., most Chinese individuals have tried to save money by property, and the property sector grew to be really, really big. And what's happening more recently is we're seeing that a lot of property is getting unsold. A lot of places are being built without any people wanting to buy them. And if you're basically building property as an investment and no one wants to buy a property, well, it's pretty much a loss, isn't it? And to give you an idea of how bad that situation is, I talked about this before as well. The Chinese property sector is about 30% of their GDP. And in terms of household wealth, it's close to 70% of household wealth. Now you can imagine a crash then, what that does to the stability of that economy. Okay. The next thing is South Africa's GDP. South Africa's GDP came in, this week or so, down a couple of fractions of percent, about 0.2 or so, lower. And that is obviously a huge, issue in this country. It wasn't quite as bad as been feared, but still it's a negative. Now, in South Africa, as we all know, there's been real issues around load shedding, as well as issues around transports of goods, etc., because of Transnet, and that's coming through in these numbers as well. We did see, for instance, that the sectors that are affected quite negatively were agriculture, which obviously relies on transport, as well as some other factors we'll talk about in a second, as well as manufacturing, which is a real problem. In South Africa, we have this large number of unemployed people, large number of people without formal education beyond a certain point. Historically, the only way to get out of that kind of situation is to have a large manufacturing sector. What that does for you is it allows people to basically earn reasonable incomes. Manufacturing generally pays reasonably well. In a an industry where you can actually build a career. So even if you're not formally educated, working in the manufacturing sector, over time you do gain experience, you do get better at what you do as a thing, and you can basically move up in the world. And it also basically employs a large number of people as well. You can have massive factories. I mean, some of the other sectors in Africa that are quite large, things like finance, mining, etc. They don't really, historically fulfill this purpose. You can't really get huge numbers of unskilled people into the financial sector, for instance. You can't really get, people into the mining sector, and you definitely don't have the same ability to have them, progress up the chain. You don't, generally, if you're mining underground, you're not going to become an engineer, after a couple of years or so on. And so this is obviously a bit of trouble for the country, the fact that we're seeing, manufacturing under this pressure. And the last news story of the week is going to be oil. The oil price has come down dramatically, despite moves by OPEC Plus to cut production. We've seen Brent crude oil prices to the mid-70s, about $75 a barrel. Now, remember, just after the 7th of October, when we had the fears around Israel and the Middle East really spiking, we saw prices closer to $90 a barrel. So we're talking about a $15 fall, which is almost a 20% fall, in terms of oil prices, which is quite dramatic. And like I said, despite the fact that we have seen, issues around, uncertainty in the Middle East and so on, the prices have come down quite dramatically, as well as, OPEC trying to cut, supply and so on. So what does this mean? For South Africa, it's very good, actually. Oil prices coming down means there's less pressure on, the amount of oil we import, so we can pay a bit less for it, and therefore it's going to help us on our balance of payments. It's going to mean that oil prices are going to translate to lower petrol prices, which is going to help us with inflation, which is going to be a big, help to the country as a whole, because it's going to free up a lot of disposable income. And we've seen, numbers in South Africa recently around consumer confidence of people making more than 20,000 rands per month, which in South Africa is considered to be the wealthier group. That confidence has come down dramatically. But if you do see, petrol prices fall a bit, more disposable income in people's pockets, it would be, I think, a big positive. And also, if we see oil prices coming lower, that does reduce inflation pressures both locally and internationally as well. And that's probably going to lead to rate cuts by next year. For those that don't know, the chance of rate cut in the US by the first quarter of next year is something like about 60%. By this, at least one rate cut by the middle of next year is something like 99%. So the market is almost guaranteeing that there's going to be a rate cut by the middle of 2024. If we do see inflation come down in South Africa as well because of lower petrol prices and so on, and a stronger rand, like I said, will be helped by this. We could also be seeing similar kind of moves on our side, which would be a big positive. I mean, we've seen, like I said, consumers under pressure because of high interest rates, high petrol prices, etc. Some pressure off the consumer's neck is going to be, I think, a welcome relief at the moment. And then let's go on to our AI segment. This week again, I'm going to talk about DeepMind. Last week I mentioned DeepMind in detail, and I'm going to talk about it again because of the latest releases, demos of what's called Gemini. Gemini is Google's basically answer to GPT-4. And so there's some features going around for Gemini. Apparently it's going to be on Google quite soon. Maybe by the time you even watch this, it might even be available on on Google. We are looking at a step change in terms of what's capable, or these things are capable of doing. In not so many words, basically, it's pretty clear right now that these machines can now see, not just see images, but see video. In the demo that I've looked at, etc., there's a person holding up, objects in front of the machine, asking it to talk about the objects. Orange, and I think it's like some other fruit, and says, "Oh, these are both kinds of foods." Talking about, it drew a duck, and it identified it was a duck. We colored the duck blue, and it says, "Oh, blue ducks are rare, but these are the kinds of blue ducks that do exist in the world." He showed it some materials, some yarn, and asked, "Give me an example of things you can build off this thing," and it gave me, really photorealistic. Really, if you didn't know this was AI generated, you would have thought they were photos of animals that were basically knitted from that color yarn. There's also examples where they demonstrate the ability of this system to do scientific research. In one example, they mentioned the fact that they gave it 200,000 articles to read, and it basically summarized them down to data points as well as conclusions. And it is in a period of like an hour or something. They call it a lunch break, so it's a reasonably short period of time. They give examples of using it to solve homework problems. Something that GPT-4 has been really bad at doing, especially mathematical homework, physical homeworks. GPT-4 can write poetry, can do essays and so on. But to ask it to mathematics, it has to do some calculations, and it's much worse than most humans are. And this Gemini could do that reasonably well. It seemed to be as good, if not better, than most people. So, like I said, it's a step change up in terms of the capacity of these products, of fully multimodality. And like I said, vision, which goes vision and audio. So you can pretty much talk to it or show it something. Imagine showing it an image on your phone. And speaking of which, it's going to come in 3 variants. The variants are going to be Ultra, Pro, and Nano. Ultra is like the huge servers that they use for Google and so on. Pro apparently is more specific to particular companies. And Nano is going to be basically something that can run on a Pixel. I don't know what the specifics of the Pixel are going to be. It's probably going to be the newer versions of Pixel as a way for Google to basically get that their own cell phones a bit of uptick, but it's probably going to move on to Android and so on. But yeah, it can run on a cell phone on the Nano version. So we're talking about an incredible amount of processing power going onto your cell phone. And in terms of what you could do with this, I mean, can you imagine taking your cell phone out and pointing it at something and saying, "What's happening here?" Or having it query a math equation, or look at some problem that you're seeing in the real world and ask it for help around it. Maybe a plumbing issue in your house, or electrical issue in your house, or you're looking at an error screen on your computer and asking this machine, like an expert, to help you and walk through the process of fixing it. And that is the kind of stuff that's pretty much available either now or in the next few months. And what I want to also point out about this is an interesting point. According to most of the tests that this thing is doing, it's beating GPT-4. But it's not beating GPT-4 by a substantial margin. This is, it's beating it in the stuff that GPT-4 does, right? Up by a bit, like 87 to 90%, in terms of the scores. This Gemini has 90, GPT has, 87. And what makes you wonder about what GPT-5 looks like, because those that are involved with OpenAI have come out and said that GPT-5 is significantly more advanced than GPT-4. And I don't know whether or not the test that they're using to measure the performance of Gemini are really capturing the difference between Gemini and GPT-4. But if it's not really capturing that difference, then we can expect when GPT-5 is released sometime next year, another step beyond what we are seeing right now from Gemini, which would be amazing. Because like I said, right now, these things appear to be able to see. It's no longer just showing it an image, or getting back to GPT-4 when the first came out, typing in a prompt. No, it's now able to do the kind of stuff that you would imagine computers or AI doing in phones. Showing it something, in the real world by the camera on your phone and asking it questions and getting real-time responses to it, like you were talking to a person. And by the way, speaking of talking to a person, apparently, according to some measures for these AI programs, this Gemini beats the average person when it comes to these measures of humanness, of the ability of AI to mimic a human. It basically beats the average person by a little bit, but still beating the average person. And like I said, this is 9 months away from the launch of GPT-4. We still have next 6 months to a year the possible launch of GPT-5. We still have not seen these programs being trained on the new generation of chips, which are coming out in the middle of next year. And we have definitely not seen the full brunt of investment money coming into the system for these programs. So, as impressive as Gemini is, unless we are hitting some fundamental technical roadblock over the next 6 months to a year or so, by the end of next year, it's going to be obsolete. There's going to be something out there that makes this thing look like, totally useless because it's not good enough. Okay, that's it for this week. Enjoy your weekend, and I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.